Hello everyone, and welcome back to finally another deck deep dive. As we gonna cover over the holidays a good couple of the WARNO League games as well over on the Twitch channel, and I will also upload them on YouTube here. And yeah, it's finally time to jump in. Here we go. As Eugen has announced a lot of reworks, we will go into a division that won't be covered by that, and that is the second Panzergrenadier, as that the TKS and so on I will do once they get the reworks. Obviously, a lot of deck deep dives again as well. But for now, go on to the division that wasn't announced to get a major rework, and that is second Panzergrenadier. Obviously, will be impacted by some changes as well in the future. But yeah, let's have a look here. This deck is pretty solid. It's a good all-rounder, and that's really its strength. It has forward deployment, it has high-level tanks, it has IFVs, it has artillery. Nothing of it is top of its league, top of its class, but all of it is solid, and that makes second Panzergrenadier a really good all-rounder, especially if you want to play on the ladder. And logistics tab already starts there. You get all-around good supplies. Siege helicopter here, really big, good for resupplying anything like artillery, or if you need really big support for your big tank blob and need it quickly, the CH can come in nicely there as well. Unimog, quick, fast, good for resupplying infantry on the flanks. Man, good for artillery, good for especially good for artillery, but also good for tanks on the front line that need resupply. So a really, really good mix here of supply units available for this deck. Infantry tab, a really solid mix as well. You get Fallschirmjägers, which have good AT. Really big advantage over 5th Panzergrenadier in this deck is that you have solid anti-tank thanks to Panzerfaust 3s. Together with the Carl Gustav, but Carl Gustav is the only higher AT that you get with the 5th Panzer. Otherwise, you rely there only on Panzerfaust 44. But yeah, Panzerfaust 3 here, really good, really strong penetration. Range, not amazing, but good accuracy and all. I also nowadays use the Fallschirmjäger leader, since the Jägerführer unfortunately doesn't get higher availability anymore. So the Fallschirmjägerführer it is, so that you can get a point advantage early on, which can be nice. You have to be really careful with your Fallschirmjägers. They're not the strongest fighting against other infantry compared to other frontline units, forward deploy units, and you also don't have much AA, no ground-based forward deploy AA in your deck, so you have to be a bit careful. You will have to play with your Ginas here, for example, to try to hunt down enemy helicopters that try to attack your forward deploy, and you have to be a bit more defensive than you're used to with forward deploy, maybe, in this deck. Panzergrenadier Marder, good job here, getting you some Marders with Milans. Yeah, the Panzergrenadiers themselves, not an amazing unit, but the Marder is a decent IFV. The Milan, unfortunately, only is a Milan 1, which really makes them a good bit weaker than they could be if they have a Milan 2, but we most likely won't see that. Though the combination is a solid unit with an IFV. The Carl Gustav is better thanks to the anti-tank capabilities it has, so it mixes nicely in there as well. Unfortunately, can't come with an ATGM on its Marder version, but yeah, 20mm is not the greatest that you have on top. The range is a bit low, but you have good frontal armor that really makes the Marders click. They can survive a hit or two. Jägers, just good sideline infantry. They aren't the greatest. They, when it comes to firepower, they are decent. They don't have a great AT, but they have a lot of manpower, and they can survive a bit of a beating, and that's what Jägers are for, just giving your IFVs something to stay behind, giving your tanks something to stay behind, and scouting and holding the line. That's what Jägers are for, and that's what they do pretty well. Pioneer with Handflammenpistole, decent CQC. The MP2 unfortunately pretty weak as a CQC weapon still. You can't bring them in Unimogs or Fuchses. The Fuchses unfortunately only having an MG3, so I'm not the biggest fan of them. The Fuchs of Milan, a bit more interesting. Yeah, that could be an option, but I like the Unimog here more to just have them cheaply. The Transport Panzer Fuchs Milan, though, if you want to have a overwhelm strategy, these can be quite nice, but the MG still doesn't really convince me, and 25 points for one armor vehicle here is quite pricey, and once more, only a Milan 1, so it doesn't kill heavy tanks or medium tanks really that well. You get some Milan 2s though as infantry squads. We take one here with the Mala Milan. That's what I usually do, the Milan 2 groups here, and the airborne one I bring in obviously as forward deploy. So this way you have a fast Milan 2 and you have one that comes with a bit more utility and some more IVs, so that you have a good number of IVs in this deck. And yeah, that really rounds up the deck nicely, as you don't get ATGMs on your tanks, so you need a good amount of Milan 2s here in the infantry tab to just keep the enemy busy with some ATGMs on the flank. And the Milan 2 obviously also heavy hitter, can deal damage against anything out there, and that is really helpful as well. Range on it is its biggest issue though. Artillery-wise, you are well set up as well. You can get Mars, you can get M109s, and M109s might be the better option than the M110. I like the M110 though, so that's why I use this gun here. I like to have 2 of those just absolutely annihilate enemy positions, and they are important to deal with enemy ATGM positions, enemy AA pieces and co. So yeah, really able to soften it up. If you want to have cheap artillery, you can go with the 155mm here, which obviously is a lot cheaper than the M109, but also susceptible to counter battery. So you have to be careful when you bring them. But if you're up against an airborne division, for example, bringing out the 140mm howitzers here early on can be a real game changer. And then we have some mortars for smoke pushes and all of that stuff, if need be. Tank-wise, we have Leo 1s and Leo 2s. 2 cards of Leo 2s here with 1 level of upvetted. The Jaguars at the moment, unfortunately, but too cost inefficient to really be worthwhile. But yeah, you get a good amount of Leo 1A5s here, Leo 1A1 coming around as well, and then M48 as the cheap unit, which gives you a 50 cal, whilst the other tanks don't quite have that. So yeah, really cheap, good fire support, goes well with the Jaegers here to push enemy infantry. Leo 1s and Leo 1A5s also combine good well with the Leo 2A3. Like Leo 2A3 in front of some Leo 1A5s can be the nice addition here, because the Leos, obviously, Leo 1's not the greatest frontal armor. Leo 2A3, quite tanky, but the Leo 1A5's pretty good at the damage dealing part of their job. Leo 1A1 lower rate of range and so on, so you have to use them more as a defensive weapon, being usually a bit of a flanky boy as well. But the Leo 1A5 is really where it's at, and the Leo 2A3 is the big boy for your deck that you need to put the pressure usually to finish the game off in the end. So these 4 Leo 2A3s really valuable. Recon? I didn't save the last change here. Yeah, Luxus, Scimitars as your cheap fire support unit additions that can help out in front of your tank push to see stuff with Fallschirmjägers here, Aufklärers here as another means of being annoying for the enemy and holding a flank with Panzerfaust 3s, giving you some more good AT capabilities on your infantry, and the Jäger just as a really beefy squad to accompany your infantry push and see for them, spot for them. You pay a decent price for them, they're not that expensive, and yeah, mixing them in with your infantry plot so that your infantry can see more is really nice. So that's why I like the Jäger as well. Survivable infantry squads are really rare, and they are quite nice usually to have. And then AA-wise, you get Gepards, which nowadays are pretty strong. You get an Ihawk, which is really fantastic. You just have to be a bit careful on the enemy counter battery, and you have to keep them moving. But 3 Ihawks usually get you through the game against most enemies. Gepard, obviously your anti-helicopter for the most part, but also can help out against planes quite nicely. Yeah, decent range against both. Fliegerfaust is just for spamming on the sides, or having something against helicopters and just jumping to shoot up. And if you set your at the front line enough, they can be quite deadly as well. Like, it takes a good couple of them, as the accuracy obviously not great, but eventually they will force the enemy back as well, and they are cheap, so you can afford them in a pinch and just get them around. Helicopter wise, I'm not the biggest fan of the BOs, but yeah, having one to bring out quickly against enemy breakthroughs with armored units can be nice, and yeah, they can be annoying, something that the enemy has to consider, so they have to bring AA, have to invest into something that they want to invest into, so still having them as an option is nice, but yeah, 6 usually are more than enough. And the hot one here is the option that I went for because it's cheaper. The hot 2, obviously good bit more penetration, good bit more accuracy, so worthwhile considering as well. 10 points more is not that much. 2 availability less is substantial, but yeah, you still can consider the hot 2 version here as well. I just went for the cheaper one because I just have them as a deterrence against the enemy for the most part, and that's why the power 1 is just as good as the power 1A1 here, basically. AA-wise, we want to be able to survive against air spam decks, so 2 cards of tornadoes are kind of a given for me. And then you want to have some strike forces. You can have some more expensive air tap as well, like MV1 and so on are all good. Like if you want to play this deck air spammy, you can absolutely do it. The tornadoes do allow for that. But in a normal deck here, the F104 AT is just a really cheap plane to bring around and annoy the enemy with, and the Ginas are good helicopter hunters. They're all the same price nowadays. I like the rocket one the most because it also can come on top of the enemy the quickest. So that is a good option here as well. But in general, this is just a support tab for your tank, artillery, and infantry that should together achieve the breakthrough. Once more, it's not the most aggressive deck, so you don't want to go overboard with your forward deployment usually, but you can put some pressure onto the more defensive decks from the get-go with that. You get forward deploy leaders, you get forward deploy strong infantry and Fallschirmjäger outclearers here. You can get ATGMs out there as well to cut off paths, and then Luxus and Scimitars can be quite helpful to solidify a push as well. And your tanks are quick, are fast, so they can push through gaps as well. You just have to be careful, obviously, with all the Leo 1A5s here and they're armored, that you don't put them into harm's way, because otherwise you will pay for it quite dearly. And yeah, that is the second Panzergrenadier. A pretty strong deck in my eyes. If you want to learn the Westgermans, I would recommend starting with this deck instead of the fifth. Fifth, a bit more one-sided, not quite as good as an all-rounder. And yeah, second Panzergrenadier, a really good deck for the latter. Not the top deck. There at the moment for sure. 35th, for example, is still stronger, but a pretty good deck. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, consider leaving a like down below, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye, and have a great day.